Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you've never been here before, nice to meet you. My name is Kimbyrleigha, and this channel is all about true crime and murder mysteries. This is the story of the Tourniquet Killer. Anthony Allen Shore was born on June 25th, 1962 in Rapid City, South Dakota, to Robert and Deanna Shore. Later, their family would actually grow with Anthony's two younger sisters, Laurel, love that name, and Gina. As Anthony's parents were both in the military at the time, the Shores family moved around a lot. Altogether, I believe it was 9 times before Anthony was even in high school. So they crisscrossed from California to Florida, and they eventually settled in Houston, Texas. Anthony's mother described him as very well behaved, hyper competitive, which I think is interesting, and he always had to be the best. It's not always a bad thing, but he had this fantastic talent to play any instrument. He could pick up music very easily, he could pick up musical instruments very easily, and he played the guitar to the trombone to the piano, so maybe he was somewhat of a savant, but at just 5 years old, he actually won a mention in the Sacramento Bee. But you know, sometimes you have to take the bad with the good, and that was what happened with Anthony because he was terrible at sports. He didn't get along well with his peers at all. Maybe that's another sign that some mental health issues were on the horizon. We'll get into that. His sisters adjusted really easily to every move, but Anthony had a lot of problems. He did not adjust well. He wasn't the type of person who could handle moving from place to place and getting to know new people. Anthony's mother also said that he would cry often, and he had tantrums. And in school, he didn't care about making straight A's for learning purposes, but he wanted to be acknowledged. He liked the acknowledgement that he was better than his classmates, and this caused him not to be very popular, and he actually got beat up a lot. If you haven't watched my last video, it was about the chessboard killer. He was also bullied, and we see this a lot. It's a common theme and a common thread throughout a lot of the murder mysteries and the true crime stories that I do read about. But for Anthony, as time passed, the behavior started to grow more sinister. As a teenager, he used his sister Gina to lure girls into his car where he would harass them. At one point, he even told one of his sisters that he and his buddies had beaten up a homeless man so severely that they actually thought they had killed him. Another common theme: hurting vulnerable individuals, people that are living on the street, people who are making their living, selling their bodies. These are people that tend to be targeted. And it's sad. It's really, really sad. There's no one really there to defend them or to care about them in a lot of these instances. Later in life, Anthony would marry 2 times, and he had 2 children of his own from his first marriage with Gina Lynn Worley, same name as his sister Gina. During his marriage with Gina, Anthony continued his harassment of much younger girls. At this point, he wasn't killing anyone, but he was still on this journey into this fantasy or tendency, if you will, of harming younger girls. And after the couple ended up divorcing, Anthony was given custody of his 2 young daughters. Then he married a woman named Amy Lynch in 1997, but they ended up getting a divorce after Amy accused him of abuse. And Anthony's daughter Tiffany would later reveal that even though their family, which looked so charming and put together from the outside world, would change completely, Anthony started to torture his daughters. I can't stomach the fact that somebody would do that. So he actually forced them to live in these terrible, miserable conditions, and he would tie them up. He would even smother them with their faces in pillows. Tiffany actually said that she remembered her father getting her extremely intoxicated. Tiffany and her sister Amber were in such poor conditions, and their teachers started to notice, and the teachers decided to alert child services. And then unfortunately, Anthony made sure he always passed the visits by having the house spotless, and his daughters were terrified. They were too scared to speak up. And I will say it's very difficult to leave someone who's abusing you in this manner because, one, deep down inside, a lot of their victims love them still, and secondly, they're terrified. Sometimes the fear doesn't seem realistic because you're like, if he's not home? Why can't you run away? They're afraid because they've been controlled so long that they're going to find themselves in a situation where he comes and finds them. Their abuser finds them, finds their family, and they can never escape. And some of these women have to keep moving again and again and again. So we can assume that the daughters felt the same way, and it took many years before Tiffany and Amber finally found the courage to tell their grandmother about all the things that their father was doing to them. This decision alone would open up a door to a chain of events for which no one would be prepared for. And Anthony Allen Shore was arrested immediately, and he received 8 years probation. 8 years probation. 8 years probation? This person's not being locked up. They're not being taken off the streets. What if they're doing this to other people? And we'll get into that. But he was also required to provide police with a DNA sample, which Anthony happily gave the police. And to everybody's surprise, in 2003, his DNA was matched to a cold case of Maria del Carmen Estrada. It looked like they had a killer on their hands, and the detectives rushed to go through his quiet brick house and see what was going on, because Anthony had moved just the year earlier, and his second wife had left him and filed for divorce after waking up and finding his hands around her neck. She never filed charges, and Anthony was now living with a new girlfriend, another woman. And she thought nothing was wrong. And she would later say, I would never have guessed anything like that was happening. A lot of people say this. They can't imagine that their son or their brother or their boyfriend or father or husband was doing this. Do they have antisocial personality disorder? Do they have borderline? Are they struggling with things? Could be, but people can also snap. Finally, after that entire search of his new girlfriend's house, 12 to 15 homicide detectives arrested him that night. And after 11 hours of questioning Anthony, he finally confessed that he had been on a killing spree from 1986 to 1995. And he actually gave the names of 4 of his victims: Lori Tremblay, Maria del Carmen Estrada, Diana Rebollar, and Dana Sanchez. And all of the girls were between the ages, and this bothers me so bad, between the ages of 9 and 20. His first victim was 15-year-old Lori Tremblay. She left her house on September 26, 1986 at 6:30 a.m. and she was catching the bus to her school. And just 1 hour later, her body was found behind a restaurant that was only 3 miles from her home. And then he went forward and strangled her to death with a cotton cord that he found in his vehicle. Anthony took his next victim, 21-year-old Maria del Carmen Estrada, on April 16, 1992, very similarly to his first victim. Maria left her home around 6:30 in the morning, planning to walk to work. 4 hours later, she was found dead in a Dairy Queen drive-thru. She was less than a mile away from her home. So Maria was found nude from the waist down. She had been sexually assaulted, and she had also been strangled like the previous victim, but police didn't really connect the two killings at all at first because there had been 6 years between the two. And in 1993, Anthony had become obsessed with a 14-year-old girl. Her name was Selma Jensky. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But she lived in a nearby neighborhood, and on October 19th, he broke into her home. This time, Anthony didn't kill her. But unfortunately, Selma couldn't identify him to the police because he was disguised at the time of the incident. On August 8th, 1994, a 9-year-old named Diana Rebollar was seen in a local grocery store, and she was leaving back home to safety, and she never made it home. Her body was found the next day behind a vacant building. Do you think it's interesting that the bodies are found so quickly? Because usually I feel like it takes a lot longer, but it seems like he just doesn't care. It's like he just haphazardly dumps these bodies, and he doesn't even take the time to hide them, to conceal them. It's almost like, I did this and I really don't care, which is disgusting. She had been badly beaten and strangled. I always think of these people's last moments, and I don't know if you do that, but I just think of their last moments, not realizing that this is going to occur. Just sitting there and then knowing in those last few seconds, like, this is happening to me. It must be so terrifying, and I think about that every single time I read about something like this. this time the murder was connected to Maria, and this was because of the killer's MO. Both girls were killed with a rope attached to a bamboo stick. I'm going to show you what this looks like. This is what he started using because I'll tell you why, but basically he changed it to this tourniquet kind of device because he realized his hands were getting hurt. And I'll tell you what he told the police, but because his little hands were, getting ripped open by the cotton thread that he was using or the rope he was using, he decided to put these sticks on the end so it would be a little bit more comfortable for him. But due to this method, he became known as a tourniquet killer. He would later tell investigators that he changed to the tourniquet after his first victim because, quote, "I hurt my finger while murdering Tremblay." 11 months after Rebollar's death, on July 6, 1995, 16-year-old Dana Sanchez was on the phone with her boyfriend, saying that she was hitchhiking to his house. Unfortunately, the driver of the car was Anthony Shore, who would later kill her as soon as she rejected his sexual advances. Again, here's the thing. I am not a victim-blaming type of person, but with my legal background, I'm holistically going to look at circumstances with the totality of everything that we know. And it is not wise and it is not safe to hitchhike. Don't put yourself in that situation. Do I believe it is justified in any way, shape, or form to take another person's life because you have these terrible compulsions? No. But I've been taught to be very careful, and your children are not always going to listen to you, but I've had the fear in me since I was a child, growing up with a father who is a convicted felon, and I just had that fear in me. I was told what could happen at a very young age, and call it bad or good, but putting yourself in that situation is going to increase the risk that something bad could happen. An anonymous phone call was made to a local news station 7 days after Dana's disappearance, directing the police to her strangled body in a Harris County field. The phone call was made by Anthony himself, and despite the fact that Anthony confessed to all 4 murders, the prosecutor decided to charge him for only Estrada's murder. So when I hear something like this, it confuses me. Why? What is going on? Why are you only charging him with 1 murder? But sometimes it's because of the evidence. Sometimes there's just not enough evidence to link them to the other crimes. And like we heard in our last video, please watch it. I'm going to link it up here. Sometimes killers confess to crimes they did not commit. So her case had the most forensic evidence, like I was just saying, including Anthony's DNA. The trial started in October 2004, and Anthony's own daughter decided to testify. And that testimony was used in the court to showcase Anthony's history of violence. Tiffany bravely sat across from her father, revisiting all of the painful moments of her abuse that she endured. She would later admit that her father, quote, looked just like some sick, twisted individual. In a taped interview played during the trial, Anthony blamed Maria's murder on voices inside of his head. He said that he didn't set out to kill her, but, quote, it got out of hand. His confession of the other 3 murders was not shown during the trial, but jurors were told he was a serial killer. And at the time, his attorney mentioned that his client wished to be put to death. He wanted to, quote, sacrifice his life for what he had done. That's interesting. Tell me your thoughts about that. The jury quickly found Anthony guilty of capital murder, and just after 1 hour, October 28, 2004, they recommended that he was sentenced to death by lethal injection. And of course, you remember that he wanted to be put to death, so I guess he got what he asked for. He was initially scheduled to be executed in October of 2017, but the date had been postponed after Anthony falsely admitted to more killings in the week prior. Again, admitting to things they didn't do. It was later concluded that Anthony was trying to save another death row inmate. His name is Larry Swearingen. And he was doing this by giving his fake confession to the crime that Larry had committed. I guess he figured I'm on death row anyway, but Larry had already been scheduled to be executed. So I guess he was trying to save him from doing that as maybe like one last good deed. During his time on death row, Anthony's legal team tried to get him out, arguing that he suffered from brain damage earlier in his life, making him ineligible for execution because he was mentally incompetent. His lawyers also claimed that the same injury interfered with his decision about wanting to be executed. Now, I actually didn't do any research into this brain injury, but I do talk about traumatic brain injuries in these videos. I think it's something to really look at, and we also see that as a common theme. Is it an excuse? No. Is it a reason? Possibly. But as expected, the appeal was turned down in early 2017, and the US Supreme Court refused to review his case. But still, in July, Anthony sent a letter to his father, sounding very hopeful. He said, "I will likely get a stay, but you never know." And then he went on to say, "I'd prefer to live a bit longer, but I'm ready if it's God's will." The same day, a judge greenlighted prosecutors' request for the execution. So Anthony Allen Shore, 55, was executed on Thursday, January 18th by lethal injection in the state's death chamber in Huntsville, and he died at 6:28 p.m. He was the first person executed in the United States in 2018. His final words were, "Ooh-wee, I can feel that," as the lethal substance was injected into his veins, and then he fell unconscious. But the good news is Anthony Allen Shore's reign of terror was finally over. Nobody had to worry that their 9 to 20-year-old daughter or sister would ever be harmed again, by him at least. Unfortunately, these type of monsters are still roaming the streets, waiting for a vulnerable person that they can take advantage of and harm. I hope you enjoyed, and please don't forget to check out my podcast every week. It's called Critique a Killer. You can find that on Apple as well as Spotify and pretty much every other podcasting platform. I will leave the link for that below as well. And if you have any suggestions for cases that you want me to cover, please leave them below in the comments. Well, that's it. That's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in one of my next videos. Bye.